Turn Bark Time, Season 2, Episode 8. I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we're going to be here a long time. Hey, happy holidays, everybody. It's, what are we on, the third or the fourth night of Hanukkah? And also Christmas just around the corner. Barker and I rocking our sweaters. Take a look. Got a lot of positive feedback on it. I'm going to be wearing Christmas sweaters all week because I have enough of them. So we are actually going to talk about a topic that was recommended to us. Again, we listened to our fans. Jill Copenhaver, shout out to Jill, and kind of asked us why would we not do the history of Santa Claus? And we jumped on it. We're all about that. So the history of Santa Claus is coming your way. Thank you, Jill.
Jill Copenhaver, we love you. The little math Obi-Wan Kenobi that lives in the corner. That hermit out there in the Dune Sea. That's right. The tail end of the queue at Quincy Middle. Lots of love, Jill. So, yeah, we're going to talk about Santa Claus. Like, it's one of those things, like, everybody's just like, it's American as apple pie. And you know, like we always thought about the history of Santa Claus. Like, has there always been Santa Claus? And so with all things Christmas, the best answer that I can have is that he's kind of like some kind of crazy, like amalgamation, like zombie of a lot of previous stories. And so I kind of wondered today as I was doing the research, we do that, right?
Amalgamation. Zombie. I was not going to say that if it would have been me to say it, but I love that line. Perfect.
Right? Right? The Walking Dead.
It's solid. You hear the background story. It makes sense.
Sorry, dog knocked something over. But my production assistant is angry. Yeah. Anyway, so where do we want to start? You want to start with, it goes kind of like, long story short, Santa Claus is called Santa Claus because British colonists or English colonists don't speak Dutch so good.
They wanted to make fun of him.
Well, it was yeah. His name was the Dutch version of Santa Claus is, what is it, Sinterklaas?
Yeah, it's Sinterklaas.
Sinterklaas.
That's my best guess based on, and not, I don't speak Dutch, but it's German would be a close enough dialect, so that would be my guess. Off the German I took in high school, which is a long time ago.
But the Dutch kind of got the idea for Sinterklaas came from like Christianity, which goes back to Saint Nicholas, who was a historic person. Are we willing to make that statement?
I would.
Now, much of the information around him, the information around him, and the claims of what he did in his life, that's where things get really debatable, because a lot of what was written about him happened a couple hundred years after he was dead. Yeah. So, you know, like when you're talking about the validity of the information, that really can be a problem. Especially when I noticed a trend. So do you want to start talking about St. Nicholas and then I'll...
Yeah, I can start talking. So St. Nicholas is a 4th century Greek Christian bishop of Myra. Am I saying that right? Yeah, of Myra. So he is known for giving gifts to the poor. And we were actually just talking about this before we started recording. There used to be, or it's not used to be, it's still there. But it was like St. Nicholas Day, or the Feast of St. Nicholas. And when I was a kid, my mom would tell us to leave our shoes outside, and he would come around and leave gifts. And that's what he used to do for people, because they would leave their shoes outside their home, and then he would drop gifts into their shoes at night. We always got candy. It was always a really fun thing because it was kind of cool, like right before, I mean, you're still a couple weeks away from Christmas. But he's actually most famous for presenting 3 impoverished daughters of a pious Christian woman with their dowries, which are payments so that they can get married, so that they didn't have to become prostitutes. So jolly old St. Nicholas, making sure prostitution's not a thing.
And that's really the story that's probably like the most solid, and it's all coming from who is it? Michael the Archimandrite.
Yep.
Apparently is somebody who's up in fairly high in the Orthodox, I think it's side of things.
Yep.
Yeah. Because they were like, well, this is the only saint that really kind of gets credit for something like this. And so what he would do is he would walk by at night and then like drop a bag of gold for like the first daughter, right? The dad's, he's like, oh, thank you, right? And then the next night he like comes by and like drops a second bag. And then the third night, like he gets spotted by the second daughter. She's like, haha, I caught you. And he's like, don't tell anybody, because if you do nice things and get credit for it, it's not doing nice stuff, right? Just let me do nice stuff, which didn't work out so well. And then there's the stories that become a little less, I guess, substantiated. There's one where he rescues 3 innocent men who's the witness who, I guess, indicted, like gives the damning testimony, was bribed to do so. And so he saves them and he gets calls out the guy who took the bribe and saves the day. And then there's another story where in a time of great famine, a butcher killed 3 kids and was letting their meat age so that he could sell them as ham. And St. Nicholas shows up and makes the sign of the cross and resurrects 3 kids. But there's always seems to be 3.
There's this theme.
I mean, there's 3 examples of 3.
Yeah.
Right. I'm finding a pattern.
And obviously just stressing this is the holiday itself of Christmas is something that could be a whole other topic as well. But it has, a lot of people believe it has very strong Christian roots, which it does. But as you're going to find with our discussion, is actually going to be kind of, I won't call it what you have the term that you so delicately put it, an amorphous zombie. But
amalgamation,
thank you. So Christmas itself is a combination of multiple things, right? And that's another question for another day. But you always ask the question, well, if Christmas is truly about the birth of Jesus, why are we putting trees up? And there's an explanation for it, but we're not going to cover it right now. You're going to have to ask for it. So,
no freebies.
Yep. Are we ready? Can I move on to the next guy?
Well, I mean,
no, keep going.
I think what happens is he lives, St. Nicholas, the historical figure, lives in 270 to 343 CE.
Yep.
Right, Common Era, or AD for the old school people out there. Yep. But he really doesn't, the holiday, right, the Feast of St. Nicholas, which is December 6th, doesn't really come about until the Middle Ages, when, right, the church is really kind of taking power, taking root. And as we covered in our Thanksgiving episode, 3 episodes ago, I can't do math. We're social studies guys.
Yep.
But fingers, for counting. That's it. Yeah. But
love it.
Anyways, in that episode, we talked about how there was so many church holidays, right, that eventually they're there's a Feast of Thanksgiving. So there was a lot of Thanksgivings and stuff. So, but anyway, this is one of those mini holidays. And it's about kind of the idea of giving back, and it's the habit of, you would often give feasts or have a feast for the poor, kind of giving back to the community, making merry, which often means boozing it up. But which is why people say why it's Merry Christmas as opposed to Happy Christmas, because Happy Christmas is fun, see, and Merry Christmas is for merry making, wassailing. Yep. But come wassail away with me. But
you're on fire today.
Don't take me to California. But anyways, that is really where I'm going to transition to Santa Claus and I have to say it that way from now on. But up in the Germanic part of Europe, because it's not really just the Dutch, but it is throughout. It's
Belgium, it's Switzerland, it's Yeah.
The German-speaking parts of Europe.
Yeah.
And that's where we start to see a little bit more of like, oh, he has a sleigh or a wagon, interchangeable, and has the ability to like kind of like fly or jump on things and like leaves gifts for people, and it's kind of like, okay, that, makes sense. And to jump way back, kind of talking about some of that like amalgamation, pre-Christian amalgamation.
Oh.
But there was also in that same area before Christianity came in was they believed in essentially like the Norse gods, and like Odin was called Woden. Whoa, Dan. But anyway, during the celebration of Yule, which is a pagan holiday, Yuletide caroling, right? Things that we find in the amalgamation. All of that training that we took those first 2 years paying off.
Yep, huge.
What training was that?
GLAD,
that's right. Amalgamation.
Guided language acquisition design.
Whoop, whoop. Dr. Martinez, be proud of us.
Yep. She doesn't watch though. That's okay.
She will now. She got a shout out. No official paid sponsorships anywhere in this. But anyway, Woden would ride through the sky during Yuletide and part of the wild hunt or the great hunt.
Wild hunt.
On his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir? I don't know. Anyway, I don't speak, obviously, but not consistently. But anyway, so like there's even, and he would, as people would sleep during Yuletide, like he would fly around above your house and like leave you presents if it had been good. So I mean, it's just another one of those like. There are a lot of people who celebrated holidays, just like we talk about Christmas. A lot of people celebrated holidays around the 25th of December because it was really super dark, right? Winter solstice, the darkest of the dark times. And then from there, things got better, right? So you would celebrate, I think the Romans called it, it was like I think the Latin was like Solus Invictus, which just sounds like super amazing. Yeah. But somebody who speaks Latin can come back. So anyways, it was like it marked the time when like after winter solstice, the days start getting longer again, right? We kind of like at that point where we taper as we get down to Christmas, dark. And then as we come back out, it lightens up, especially in Europe very slowly, as it does in Washington.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because then like, so not only do you have those three, and one of the biggest things is modern day like Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, however you want to, Kris Kringle, all those things. They actually owe a lot to Woden. Like that's where he gets the white beard, right? Because he has a white beard. It's where he kind of gets a cloak. Like we start to see some of these things kind of drift in because again, Santa Claus or Saint Nicholas was a bishop, and so they wear like bishop robes from that time period. But then again, like the beard is like comes from Woden and stuff like that. The other person that is kind of mixed in with this person, which is where Saint Nicholas gets tied from December 6th to now December 25th for Christmas, is actually Father Christmas. And Father Christmas is a person that dates back to the 16th century during the reign of Henry VIII. And he's pictured as a very large man in a green or scarlet robes with like fur lining. Again, going back to that Santa Claus, right? Obviously, modern day Santa Claus wears red, which again goes with the bishop robes, but still fur-lined cloak and things like that. He's the spirit of good Christmas. So he brings peace, joy, good food, wine, revelry. So like Barker said, like we're going Merry Christmas. Not Happy Christmas because we're being merry. But you can't be married until you're 21. So just remember that. And so England, and we could go down Henry VIII tunnel. That's another one we should actually think about is Henry VIII. That'd be a good topic. But Henry VIII actually separates from the Catholic Church and makes his own church, which we know the Church of England or Anglicanism. And so you have to get rid of the Feast of St. Nicholas because you're not Catholic anymore. And so Father Christmas kind of gets moved into that Christmas day. type. You may recognize Father Christmas too as the ghost of Christmas Present in the Charles Dickens classic A Christmas Carol. So have you ever seen like a rendition of that, whether it be on stage or whether it be on TV or whether you've read the book? The man that is described in A Christmas Carol is Father Christmas.
The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Okay, the Muppet Christmas Carol. Perfect.
By far the best.
And so so that is the kind of the character there that's that is like the kind of the last bit, and that's where you pull finally Saint Nicholas or Santa Claus or Woden, and they kind of, like Barker said, they make an amalgamation my bad, into this character that we actually know today. And then this character develops as we build it. And the first mentioning of like Santa Claus in the United States is actually in 1773. Is the first time that Santa Claus gets mentioned into United States history. And it was actually really funny because the picture was actually it was Washington Irving later on in 1809 will actually make fun of Santa Claus because obviously he's Anglicanized is the term that they use to make him into Santa Claus, and he loses his bishop apparel, right? And that's where he gets the robe or the cloak or the coat that we know of him today that's fur-lined. He's like a thicker belly and stuff like that. So it was started off as a joke, but people kind of kept going with it. And
like in 1823 is where we get, everybody knows the poem, The Night Before Christmas, right? And that was written in 1823. It was featured first in the Sentinel of Troy, New York, by Clement Moore. And there's some debate about whether he's the one who actually wrote it or if he just took claim for it. But that's where you have, but when you think about it, like the description of Santa Claus there is that he says a jolly old elf?
Yep.
With 8 tiny reindeer. And when we think about the scale of Santa and the reindeer in modern times, it is definitely not tiny reindeer, right? Jared Diamond tells us that domestication, let alone miniaturization and domestication, is very hard. So, but, so like the Santa Claus that we know, the image that we so very, very like strongly identify with in America, we can blame on one person, and that's Thomas Nast, the great political cartoonist that most people, he was the one who is the reason that Democrats are donkeys and Republicans are elephants.
Yeah.
Right? He was writing in, what was it, Puck? I think Puck was the name of the magazine.
I believe so. No, Harper's Weekly.
I think he did work for Puck too, though. He was, because you draw pictures.
Yeah, and Puck is one of the pictures that I found. He is in Puck, but I think the first image, let me double check,
is from Harper's Weekly.
It's Harper's Weekly, yeah.
In 1863.
Yep.
Or is 1863 the first time that they draws him? But the one that's most iconic, that we're going to show you on the screen, isn't drawn until 1881, which is where we see the fat-bellied Santa with the big cheery smile. Like, he's not this diminutive little old jolly elf.
Yeah.
He's an old fat man.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it kind of builds. But what's happening, and this is where this stuff is where we don't think about where Santa Claus comes from, because it's just built into our culture, right? Like, you were a kid, if you're an adult watching this, and you were told about Santa, and you were told how, magical, and how he comes and visits every child in the world and everything like that, and he brings presents. And then you, if you have children, have told that to your children, right? Because it's as much as you want to say, like, there are a lot of people out there who are like, well, like, it's kind of lying to your kids and stuff like that. It's just kind of a cool like thing that's always kept alive. And I think even as adults, like we still sing songs about Santa at Christmas time, right? Like one of my favorite all-time Christmas songs is Bruce Springsteen's version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. It's like he's live and he's talking to his like saxophonist and he's like, have you been good? Santa gonna bring you a new saxophone? And he like asks the crowd if they've been good. And he goes, how many of you guys been good or what? And they look at him and he's like, it's not that many. That's not many. You guys are in trouble. But then he just rocks out. Like it's just a cool song. So it's one of those ones where, but we keep going, right? So remember, Harper's Weekly is a pretty common magazine, right? Like these are where the stuff about Santa gets built up. And all you have to do is add one little thing to your story. And people are like, oh, yeah, that sounds right. And then it can be added on to continually, right? And you look at all the different, like, I'm going to go too far ahead. Go ahead. You had a
point. But like you said, like there's Santa Claus has been seen. He starts to become seen in advertising. And a lot of people, there's kind of this urban myth. Before I get too far, sorry, we're like trying to gauge your, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Yeah. So the first evidence of like a mall Santa is in 1890. A guy named James, I think it's Edgar, had a department store in New York. No, sorry, Massachusetts. Fact check. But he would dress up as Santa to try and get people to come in. And then by 1918, you had people starting to do photo ops, like take your kids to get a photo with Santa. I personally hate this because my kids don't necessarily care for it. So it's like, let's traumatize my kids and get this photo where they're all like, Merry Christmas from the Barkers. So my kids are awesome, just not with strangers in costumes. But
good thing, which is a good thing.
During this time,
that's how it started.
Even what's his name? Frank Baum, the guy who wrote The Wizard of Oz. Yeah. Writes a story about Santa Claus, like this big mythology. It reminds me of like, you don't have kids, but there's a movie out called Rise of the Guardians.
Yeah, I know.
It's like the Tooth Fairy, Jack Frost, and all these mythical creatures, like kind of like how they have all like this like society kind of thing. And it's Frank Baum kind of plays with that idea because there was no solid mythos. You know what I mean? And like they even blame like the reason that Santa lives at the North Pole was because Thomas Nast like wrote something and was like, oh yeah, Santa lives by the North Pole, like in one of his pictures. And then people were like, oh, he lives in the North Pole.
Yeah, it just became standard.
And then at some point somebody was like, oh yeah, and his wife was there. And like, oh, he's married?
Yeah.
Now there's a Mrs. Claus. Well, and then after the Industrial Revolution, he doesn't make everything himself. He has a freaking assembly line. Yeah. He's the Henry Ford of the North. Yeah. There can only be one Ford of the North, and his name is Claus.
Well, I take this as most likely like when you have something you're passionate about and you get to kind of learn about it more, or it's just something that's kind of cool. Like, so like, and not to go too off track, like I like Avatar: The Last Airbender cartoon on Nickelodeon. And there are a bunch of stuff that like the writers have kept, they didn't stop making the show, but they've kept writing about different avatars and they give different origin stories. And it's like, it's the coolest thing to me. And like, I keep eating it up, even though I know they're just making up what they want to make up for a story. Like, it's just cool. And so, I mean, that's what basically Santa Claus kind of does. What else is really cool, though, because you could jump to the department store, also in the 1930s, a classic, iconic image of Santa Claus enjoying his favorite frosty beverage, not to be confused with beer, but is a Coca-Cola. And this, I'm actually going to take like 20 seconds to talk about. My favorite family tradition that we had as a kid was Santa got cookies and an ice cold bottle of Coca-Cola, the glass bottles, back in the day. Not to be confused with our Mexicokes with the real sugar in them, but like just the little classic bottles. And so what we do is there was 5 of us in our family, and we'd buy a 6-pack. So the 6th one was for Santa. And then, and that was always cool. And I just remember, and I love telling my dad that. I was like, you just loved it because you got another Coke, like when you handed out presents. And he was like, yeah, That's why we did it. I didn't need milk sitting out. I didn't want warm milk, room temperature milk.
In different cultures all across the world leave different presents. Like in Ireland, like instead of milk, they leave Guinness.
That genius.
and like mincemeat pies, I think, instead of cookies.
Yeah. It's so what I found is like super cool. Like they just and so Santa has been used on advertising. I think I'm looking here. It's the earliest was it was used to sell mineral water in 1915, and then ginger ale in 1923. So he just keeps building. And so like popular culture like built the Santa Claus that we know today, and he's a long way off from the Santa or the center. What am I saying? Sinterklaas or Father Christmas or Woden. It's all these different things, these amalgamation, rolled together. And so, go ahead, Bart. I know you got a point. I can see it.
One of the misconceptions, I guess, is that Coca-Cola created Santa Claus. And that Santa wears red because of Coca-Cola. And it's not. It's not true. He existed before. He was just a really good fit for them. At one point, they added an extra character called Sprite Boy, who wears a little bottle, like Coca-Cola bottle cap. Yeah. And it just reminds me of like E-Boy from Wreck-It Ralph, the second Wreck-It Ralph. You got it, champ. You know, just kind of like, oh, boy, howdy. Because it's from that same time period.
Yeah.
But fun fact, there has been a Santa school that has been open since 1937.
I saw that.
Charles W. Howard Santa School. Again, no paid promotions. I emailed them today. I'm waiting for a response.
What did you ask them?
I mean, just to give us your email and we'll send you information.
Oh, okay.
I tried to look at pricing and they said there is no more availability. So I don't know if the snow globe's already been shaken for the year or what.
Well, but take a look, Barker. You would have not very many days to train and then play Santa.
You know, so I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's very much in that keeping with that idea of advertising is how we see him used most often. A holiday staple who is a creation of advertising is that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He can't even be a sellout because he started as a sellout. He's just like a cute little claymation extension of the man, right? Santa Claus is an amalgamation of the people, where Rudolph was just Montgomery Ward, just cash grab, right? Buy our children's book about this poor little reindeer. But I do like me some Yukon Cornelius. You got to fight the bumbles; they bounce.
Yep. By the way, no paid promotions, but if you're a Hamilton fan and you haven't watched Hamildolph yet, please take your time. Hamildolph, pause this video, go find it.
Our Hamilton, Rudolph, Google works just, our search in YouTube works just as well.
Yep.
We know we're not pros at the algorithm. Look at our views. We're definitely not the pros.
Yep.
But you know, I just think it's interesting that. I got curious about like when did we start? Was there like ever a start to when we started pushing letters to Santa? And nobody really has a solid date on when that started. And it's always one of these things where like, well, people have always kind of maybe written to Santa. And they talked about how it kicked up after the Civil War because people started using the mail service in America.
Yeah.
And I think secretly there's evidence of parents all the way back in like the early 1800s who would have their kids write letters and then they would just reply to them and be like, these are the things you need to improve. Like that's kind of a D move, Mom, but whatever.
Seriously.
The USPS actually has a system set up where you, before the 14th, so you missed your cutoff date, Mom and Dad, like I did. Hashtag parenting lose, not win, but parenting fail. There we go. But you can actually send a letter to Anchorage, Alaska, North Pole, Alaska, and then they'll get it. But even in at the turn of the century, they started having, the post office was like, we can't just throw, because they started with they were like undeliverable letters and they like threw them away.
Yeah.
And then somebody was like, doesn't feel right. Right? We're already lying to the kids. We can't just throw away the letters.
Yeah.
And so they started like finding charities in their local community. So postal workers would volunteer to open them up, and then they would try and connect like needy families with charities that would be willing to answer the letters or actually like come through, like you think like Angel Tree.
Yeah.
Right? And they would actually like help deliver, gifts to these people. So it's just kind of interesting that the USPS actually has a system in place to deal with letters to Santa, or like, and they even have it where like you send your kid's letter, you send your response to your kid's letter in the same envelope, and somehow they magically like they must open your envelope. I don't know, like throw your kid's letter away, put your envelope in there, take your letter, put it in their envelope, and then like send it back to your kid or something. I don't know. Magic. But I mean, it's really interesting. And right, you look at all the different Santa Clauses that we have in media now.
Yeah.
And they pretty much all look the same, whether it's Tim Allen going from Tim the Toolman Taylor to Santa Claus.
Yeah.
He gains the weight, he gains the beard, all of that. Paul Giamatti played Santa Claus at one point. I can't remember what movie it was, but I saw his picture and I was like, oh, Paul Giamatti. John Adams became Santa.
Yeah, Tom Hanks in Polar Express.
Oh, I'm not a huge fan of the Polar Express.
Really? I like it. Book is obviously my favorite because we got read. That was our Christmas Eve kind of book. Like we would pull that book out and read it. And there were a couple other books that we'd always read on Christmas. But here's an interesting thing, and this is from Jonathan Meath, who portrays Santa in 2011, that I thought was really interesting, kind of like talking about the cultural icon. Because again, he is in a ton of movies, right? Like you can say like the first movie he's in is in 1912, is the first person to have been identified to play Santa Claus in a film. And the movie's called Santa Claus. But you're talking like Miracle on 34th Street, The Santa Claus, Elf,
Ernest Saves Christmas.
Yep. I mean, there's tons. But this is what was interesting about Jonathan Meath is he said Santa is the only cultural icon we have whose male does not carry a gun, is all about peace, joy, and giving and caring for other people. And then he goes on to say that is part of the magic for me, especially in a culture where we've become commercialized and hooked into manufactured icons. Santa is much more organic, integral, and connected to the past, and therefore connected to the future. And I think that's a really interesting point. Like when you talk about Santa, right? Because like you can pick out main icons and stuff like that, but like their goal is not to be this, happy person who tries to help everybody. And cares for everybody and has that and spreads peace and joy. And I mean, you probably think of some, but like, again, when he played this in 2011, he's like, that's what's cool about it is that when you play this guy, you're playing this person who just everyone can uniformly say like, this is an awesome person. Like it's just a great icon to play. So.
Unless you're Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah. That's a whole nother story.
But I think that's the whole point of that movie was to go to the opposite side of it and be like, right. What would it be like if it was? But he actually does turn around and come around in the movie.
As expected.
So it's kind of the norm that we see or the social norm that it's reinforcing or the more from a sociological term, just like with Thanksgiving, is the idea of like family, good times, food, and then caring for one another. And I think that's just a really important message that a lot of people need to hear right now in America is that we just need to be nice to each other. I talk to my personal kids as well as my students about the idea of do something nice for somebody else during the Christmas time and don't take a stupid picture or video of it or post about it on social media. Just do something nice for another person and know that your reward is that person feeling better, right? Like there was a Dairy Queen, I think somewhere where there 900 people in a row paid it forward.
Yeah, I saw that.
Right? They said, I'll pay for the person behind me. And like, it happened to us, like we got coffee a weekend ago in December, very beginning of December. We pulled up and the guy's like, oh yeah, the people in front of you paid for yours. And I was like, oh, well, I'll pay for the guy behind me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's just like, do those little things, but it's like you don't. As soon as you turn a generous event into an opportunity for people to give you social praise for being generous. It's no longer about your generosity. It's about you gaining notoriety for yourself and receiving those likes or shares or retweets.
Yep.
Right? So be a generosity ninja.
Well, and one of those things too is that's really interesting is like when you talk about people being generous around this time, it usually involves like they don't know. It's like a person, like there was a guy who paid off like 110 people's debt to the utility company, and just so they wouldn't have to have their power turned off this month or whatnot. And it's a picture of him, but like they don't give him like the name. I'm sure they did in the article, but it was like, okay, that's cool. But yeah, just doing that stuff to really be kind and like really think about it. We've all had a tough year. Like I don't know, I don't care who you are. Something this year probably happened to you that was tough. Whether it was whether it was at the national, the world, international, or just down to local level. And so doing those types of things, like right now we're doing a Secret Santa, and it's so much fun. Like just leaving gifts for our people, and it's just because you just know that when they get there, like I got today, I went to my box and there was a bag in my box that said Zach T, enjoy, and I opened it up and it was gummy worms, and I was so excited. Like I was just like, this is great. The other day I got popcorn and Tapatio. I was like, this is amazing. Like, I love this. So it's just kind of fun. So that would be like, if you're looking at, again, take a look at like St. Nicholas, if you want an example, right? Like he doesn't want to be caught helping people. That's not his goal. His goal is to just help the people that he can help. And that's why he delivered his stuff at night, so that it wouldn't be a big deal. It was all about the person, not about him. So. Anything else, Bark?
Be human to other humans. Have a good time. Be safe. Be smart.
And be merry if you're old enough. We're gonna take a 1-week hiatus, and we'll be back for the end of the year. We'll drop a video on the 31st to celebrate New Year's Eve with you guys and gals and peeps and peoples. So until next time, I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we're going to be here a long time. Have a good night, everybody.
Be safe.
Be well. And from Barker and I, happy holidays.
Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Joyous Kwanzaa. Festivus for the rest of us.
Festivus for the rest of us. Good night, everybody.